How to stay calm when people try to humiliate you with 9 Stoic truths, Stoic mindset. Introduction. Someone says something meant to embarrass you, and before you can even think clearly, your body already knows what happened. Your face gets hot. Your chest tightens. Your throat feels strange, like the right words are trapped somewhere below your pride. And for one sharp second, you are not just hearing what they said. You are feeling the room around it, the silence, the looks, the nervous laugh from someone who does not want to get involved, the sudden pressure to answer perfectly, because if you say too much, you look weak, and if you say nothing, you feel like they got away with it. That is what humiliation does. It does not just hurt your feelings. It tries to put you on trial inside your own mind. Maybe it happens at work, when someone turns one mistake into a public performance. Maybe it happens in a relationship, when a person hides cruelty behind sarcasm and then calls you sensitive for noticing. Maybe it happens with family, where someone brings up an old version of you as if your growth never counted. Maybe it happens in a group of friends when a joke is not really a joke. It is a small knife wrapped in laughter, and everyone expects you to smile while it cuts. And in that moment, there is a danger most people never see. The danger is not only the insult, the danger is what the insult is trying to make you become. Because humiliation is not just someone saying something cruel. It is a test. It tests whether another person can take control of your breathing, your voice, your choices, your self-image, your dignity, and your peace. It tests whether their contempt can enter your mind and start speaking in your own voice. It tests whether one sentence spoken by one person in one moment can make you forget who you have fought so hard to become. That is why staying calm is not weakness. It is not pretending it did not hurt. It is not smiling while someone disrespects you. It is not becoming so quiet that people can walk over you and call it wisdom. Real Stoic calm is something much stronger than that. It is the disciplined refusal to let another person's lack of self-command become your own, because the person trying to humiliate you often wants a reaction they can use. If you explode, they call you unstable. If you over-explain, they enjoy watching you work for their approval. If you shrink, they learn where your shame lives. If you insult them back, they drag you down into the same mud and then point at your dirty hands. But if you pause, if you breathe, if you observe, if you choose your response, instead of letting the wound choose it for you, something changes. The insult may still hurt. The room may still feel uncomfortable. Your body may still remember the blow, but the ownership of the moment begins to return to you. That is what the Stoics understood. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by difficult people, ambitious people, jealous people, manipulative people, and people who smiled in public while sharpening knives in private. Seneca understood how quickly anger can turn a mind into a servant. Epictetus knew that the deepest prison is not what people say about you, but what you agree to believe about yourself after they say it. And that is the heart of this video. You are going to learn 9 Stoic truths for staying calm when people try to humiliate you. Not soft advice, not motivational phrases, not a pretty philosophy for peaceful days. These are truths for the real moments, the cold laugh, the public comment, the fake joke, the disrespectful tone, the family insult, the workplace embarrassment, the relationship where someone knows exactly where to press because they have studied your wounds. You will learn why humiliation is a test of ownership, why their contempt does not define your value, why calm can expose an insult better than anger, why dignity does not need to beg for recognition, why shame loses power when you stop hiding from it, why you must never become the person trying to break you, why a precise response is stronger than a loud one, why walking away can be victory, and why even humiliation can become training for a stronger mind. Because the deeper truth is this: you do not become small because someone tries to make you small. You become small only when you let their disorder decide who you are. And the first Stoic truth begins right there. Humiliation is not just about what someone says. It is about whether you let them take ownership of your mind. 1. Humiliation is a test of ownership. Humiliation is not only an attack on your image, it is a test of ownership. The person trying to humiliate you wants to see whether they can take possession of something that should never belong to them, your inner state. They may not explain it that way. Most people who humiliate others are not sitting there with a strategy written out in their head. But beneath the sharp comment, beneath the mocking tone, beneath the public correction, beneath the joke that feels a little too calculated, there is often a hidden question. Can I make you lose control? Can I make you doubt yourself? Can I make you defend your worth like it is now in my hands? Can I make you spend the rest of the day thinking about me? That is why humiliation feels so intense. It is not only a sentence entering your ears, it is a hand reaching for the steering wheel of your mind. And if you react without awareness, you may give them exactly what they came for. Someone speaks to you with contempt and your mind immediately whispers, maybe they're right. Someone laughs and your mind says, everyone sees me differently now. Someone exposes a mistake and your ego screams, fix this right now, or your dignity is gone. That is the moment ownership begins to shift, not when they speak, when your mind starts obeying. The Stoic truth is simple, but it is not easy. The insult is external, the surrender is internal. This does not mean disrespect is harmless. It does not mean humiliation is imaginary. It does not mean words cannot cut deeply. They can. Anyone who has been mocked in front of others, dismissed by someone they respected, shamed by a partner, embarrassed by a boss, or treated like they were nothing, knows that the body remembers those moments. But the deepest wound often comes from what your mind decides the insult means. If someone mocks you and your mind decides, this proves I am worthless, they now own more than a moment. They own part of your self-image. If someone criticizes you publicly and your mind decides, I must destroy their opinion before I can feel whole again, they now own your peace. If someone rejects you and your mind decides, this confirms I am not enough, they now own your identity. If someone tries to make you look small and your mind decides, I have to become loud, cruel, desperate, or defensive to become large again, they now own your conduct. That is the real danger, not humiliation itself, the transfer of ownership. A Stoic does not ask first, how do I punish this person? A Stoic asks, what part of me are they trying to take? Are they trying to take my calm, my self-respect, my clarity, my ability to choose, my dignity, my sense of who I am before reason has examined the moment? That question changes everything, because once you see humiliation as an ownership test, your response becomes different. You stop fighting only for your image and start protecting the source of your image. You stop begging the room to understand you and begin guarding your own judgment. You stop trying to prove that you are not small and begin refusing to participate in the act of becoming small. There is a difference. Trying to prove you are not small often comes from fear. Refusing to become small comes from self-command, and self-command does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like one breath before you answer, a slower voice, a calm look, a short sentence, a decision not to chase the insult, a refusal to let the room's energy enter your bloodstream. Humiliation wants speed. It wants your body to move before wisdom arrives. It wants your nervous system to become the battlefield. It wants your pride to speak first and your character to clean up the damage later. But the Stoic pause interrupts the theft. In that pause, you tell yourself, this is not mine yet. This person has spoken. Now I decide what enters. That moment matters more than most people realize, because if you can place even a few seconds between their attempt and your response, you are no longer being dragged. You are choosing. And the person who chooses has already reclaimed power. This does not mean you stay silent forever. It does not mean you pretend nothing happened. It does not mean you allow disrespect to become normal. It means you refuse to respond from the part of you that has already surrendered. If you speak, speak from possession of yourself. If you set a boundary, set it from clarity. If you leave, leave because your dignity decided the room was no longer worthy of your presence, not because shame chased you out. A person can try to humiliate you in many ways. They can joke about your appearance. They can question your intelligence. They can expose a mistake. They can compare you to someone else. They can treat your effort as invisible. They can bring up your past because your present makes them uncomfortable. They can use that calm, controlled tone that makes cruelty sound reasonable. But none of these things automatically owns you. The attempt is theirs. The agreement would be yours. That is where strength begins, not in having the perfect comeback, not in making everyone see your side, not in humiliating them back so the room laughs at them instead. Strength begins when you can stand inside the sting and still say, my mind is not available for possession. So the next time someone tries to humiliate you, do not start by asking, what should I say? Start with this. What are they trying to make me believe about myself? Then ask, is it true? Then ask, even if there is some truth here, does this person have the authority to define my entire character? Most of the time the answer will be no. Maybe you made a mistake. That does not make you worthless. Maybe you were unprepared. That does not make you inferior. Maybe someone saw weakness. That does not mean your entire life is weakness. Maybe the room laughed. That does not mean the room knows you. Humiliation tries to turn one moment into a sentence over your identity. Stoicism breaks that sentence. It says, one moment is one moment. One opinion is one opinion. One person's contempt is one person's condition. My character is built by my choices, not by another person's attempt to diminish me. This is why calm is so powerful. Calm tells the humiliator, without needing to announce it, you may have spoken, but you have not taken ownership. And once you understand that, the next truth becomes easier to see. Because if humiliation is a test of ownership, then you must also understand this. Their contempt does not define your value. 2, their contempt does not define your value. A person can look at gold and call it worthless. That does not change the nature of gold. It only reveals the poverty of their perception. This is one of the hardest truths to remember when someone tries to humiliate you. Because humiliation does not feel like an opinion in the moment. It feels like a verdict. A comment lands, a laugh follows, a dismissive tone appears. A person looks at you as if you are beneath them, and suddenly your mind starts fighting a frightening question. Did they just reveal something about me that everyone else can now see? That question is what gives contempt its power. Contempt does not simply say, I disagree with you. It says, you are beneath me. It does not simply say, you made a mistake. It says, your mistake reveals your worth. It does not simply say, I dislike something about you. It says, you should see yourself through my disgust. And if you are not careful, you begin doing exactly that. You start borrowing their eyes. You replay the moment later, not from your own center, but from their perspective. You imagine how you looked, how your voice sounded, whether people noticed your discomfort, whether they lost respect for you, whether the humiliation confirmed something you secretly feared about yourself. And slowly one person's contempt becomes a mirror you keep returning to. That is dangerous because not every mirror tells the truth. Some mirrors are warped by envy. Some are stained by insecurity. Some are cracked by bitterness. Some belong to people who only feel tall when someone else feels small. Before you let another person's contempt enter your identity, examine the source. Ask, who is speaking? Is this person ruled by reason? Do they live with discipline? Do they practice fairness? Do they speak with self-command? Do they correct people because they care about truth or because they enjoy superiority? Do they show the kind of character I would want to imitate? If not, why are you treating their contempt as authority? Some people speak from wisdom, some speak from pain, some speak from ego, some speak from insecurity and call it honesty. You need to know the difference before you absorb their words. A cruel person can point at a real mistake and still be cruel. A jealous person can notice a flaw and still be jealous. An arrogant person can say something accurate and still be arrogant. This means you do not need to reject every criticism. Stoicism is not denial. If there is truth in what was said, take the truth, use it, improve from it, let the correction sharpen you, but do not swallow the contempt wrapped around it. That distinction can save your peace. Most people do one of two things when they are humiliated. They collapse completely or they reject everything defensively. The Stoic does neither. The Stoic separates the useful from the poisonous. Maybe they were right that you were unprepared. Good. Prepare better. Maybe they were right that you made an error. Good. Correct it. Maybe they were right that your behavior needs adjustment. Good. Adjust it. But if they added mockery, contempt, humiliation, or the desire to make you feel inferior, leave that part with them. That belongs to their character, not yours. This is especially important when humiliation happens in front of others. Public shame has a way of multiplying itself. It is not only the person who humiliated you, it is the eyes around you, the silence, the awkward pause, the nervous laughter, the fear that your image changed in everyone's mind at once. But ask yourself honestly, how many people in that room truly know your discipline? How many know what you have survived? How many know the private battles you won without applause? How many know the nights you kept going when no one saw? How many know the full measure of your character? Very few, maybe none. So why let a room with limited knowledge become the court of your worth? Their reaction may hurt, it may disappoint you, it may show you who lacks courage, but it does not have permission to define you. If your value rises and falls with every expression on another person's face, you will never be free. You will live as a prisoner of micro-reactions. A laugh will shrink you. A compliment will inflate you. A criticism will destroy you. An insult will possess you. A crowd's approval will become your oxygen. That is not dignity. That is dependence. Dignity begins when you can say, I will examine what is true, but I will not let contempt become my identity. This is not easy. Anyone who says humiliation does not hurt is either lying or has not been truly humiliated in a place that matters. It hurts when someone speaks to you like you are nothing. It hurts when people laugh. It hurts when someone you trusted uses private knowledge as a weapon. It hurts when a person with power tries to make you look incompetent. It hurts when the insult touches something you already feared about yourself. But pain is not proof. Pain proves that something reached you. It does not prove that the thing was true. That difference is vital. When contempt hits you, interrupt the judgment before it becomes identity. Do not say, they humiliated me, so I am small. Say, they attempted to reduce me, now I decide whether I will agree. Do not say, they mocked me, so everyone sees me as weak. Say, They mocked me. Their mockery is an event. My character remains my responsibility. Do not say, they exposed me. Say, they revealed something about themselves and perhaps something I can improve. I will take what is useful and leave what is corrupt. When this is how you stay calm, not by pretending you are unaffected, by refusing to let the lowest part of another person become the loudest voice inside your own mind. Their contempt is not the full story. It may not even be an honest story. Sometimes people humiliate those they fear. Sometimes they belittle what they cannot control. Sometimes they mock the person who makes them feel morally exposed. Sometimes they call you weak because your restraint reminds them of their own lack of it. Sometimes they try to make you look foolish because your growth makes them uncomfortable. Do not rush to assume contempt is wisdom. Often, contempt is confession. A person's need to humiliate can confess envy. It can confess insecurity. It can confess emotional immaturity. It can confess hunger for dominance. It can confess that they lack the language for honest disagreement, so they use shame instead. When you see this clearly, contempt loses some of its magic. It becomes less like a verdict and more like smoke from a troubled fire. You may still smell it. You may still need to step away from it, but you no longer mistake it for the sky. This is the second Stoic truth. Their contempt does not define your value. Your value is shown through your choices, your discipline, your honesty, your courage, your willingness to correct yourself, your ability to remain upright when someone tries to bend you with shame. And once you stop letting contempt define your worth, something powerful happens in the room. The insult starts to lose its costume. Your calm begins to expose the poverty of the attack itself. 3. Calm exposes the poverty of the insult. There is something humiliation desperately needs from you. It needs movement. It needs your face to change. It needs your voice to shake.
It needs your anger to rise quickly enough for everyone to forget the cruelty that came first. It needs your defensiveness, your panic, your long explanation, your emotional collapse. It needs you to help complete the scene. Because an insult standing alone is often ugly, but an insult followed by your uncontrolled reaction becomes a story the other person can manipulate. They say something cruel, you explode.
Now, the room is not looking at their cruelty. The room is looking at your explosion. They made the first wound, but your reaction becomes the evidence people remember. This is one of the oldest tricks of humiliation. Someone throws the match, waits for the fire, then points at the flames and says, "See, this is who they really are." That is why calm is not weakness in moments like this. Calm is exposure. When you stay calm, the insult has nowhere to hide. It cannot disappear behind your rage. It cannot disguise itself behind your overreaction. It cannot borrow your emotion to make itself look justified. It has to stand there. A harsh comment in a quiet room. A cheap joke without the reward of your collapse. A humiliating remark that now reveals more about the speaker than the target. Most people think staying calm means you let the person get away with it, but often the opposite happens. Your calm removes the distraction. It prevents the humiliator from changing the subject from their behavior to your reaction. There is a kind of silence after a cruel comment that can become heavier than any comeback. Not the silence of fear, the silence of refusal, the silence that says, "I heard what you said, and I will not damage myself trying to prove that it was beneath me." The first emotion wants to rescue your image. The wiser mind wants to protect your character. Those are not the same thing. Your image wants speed. Your character needs command. Your image says, "Say something now," so they do not think they won. Your character says, "Do not become useful to the person trying to provoke you." That is the difference between dignity and performance. The person trying to humiliate you is often trying to create a version of you that serves their story. If they can make you angry, they can call you unstable. If they can make you defensive, they can call you insecure. If they can make you beg to be understood, they can feel superior. If they can make you cruel, they can pretend you were always the problem. But calm interrupts the script. It says, "You do not get to choose the version of me that appears here." This does not require you to act emotionless. You are allowed to feel the heat. You are allowed to feel embarrassment. You are allowed to feel that sudden private wound that opens when someone tries to make you small. Stoicism is not pretending the body does not react. It is refusing to let the body become the ruler. A calm person is not a person without emotion. A calm person is someone whose emotion has not been given the authority to drive. That is why your first task is not to answer. Your first task is to remain in possession of yourself long enough to see the whole moment. What did they say? Why did they say it here? Why in front of these people? Why with that tone? Was it correction? Or was it display? Was it truth? Or was it dominance? Was it necessary? Or was it entertainment at your expense? These questions cannot appear if you are already shouting. They need space, they need breath, they need the discipline to let the humiliation reveal itself before you rush to cover it with noise. And when you do this, something strange happens. The room may begin to notice what you noticed, not always. Some rooms are cowardly. Some groups protect the cruel person because it is easier than confronting the truth. Some people laugh because they are afraid of becoming the next target. But even then, your calm still protects you, because your peace cannot depend on whether the room has courage. That would be another form of slavery. The Stoic does not stay calm because everyone will applaud it. The Stoic stays calm because self-command is valuable even when nobody recognizes it. Sometimes your calm response is silence. You let the comments sit. You do not rescue them from the ugliness of what they said. You do not laugh along to make everyone comfortable. You do not pretend it was harmless if it was not. Sometimes your calm response is a short sentence. "I'm not going to accept being spoken to like that. That was unnecessary." If you have a real point, make it respectfully. "You can disagree without trying to humiliate me." Notice how different that is from a long emotional speech. A long speech can give away too much. It can reveal the wound. It can show them exactly where the arrow landed, but a precise sentence returns the burden to them without handing them your inner life. That is why calm can be more intimidating than anger. Anger is easy to understand. People know what to do with anger. They argue with it. They dismiss it. They mock it. They use it. But calm is harder to control. A person who remains steady after being provoked creates uncertainty in the one who tried to provoke them. The humiliator expected a predictable response. They expected shame, aggression, explanation, collapse. Instead, they meet someone who can feel the impact and still remain governed. That unsettles them, because their tactic failed. They reached for the handle and found nothing to pull. Think of a person throwing a stone into deep water. If the water is shallow, the stone hits hard and everything splashes violently. But if the water is deep, the stone disappears. It may create ripples, yes, but it does not own the depth. That is what you are building, depth. Not a perfect mask, not fake indifference. Depth. The kind of inner depth where an insult may disturb the surface, but it cannot reach the bottom of who you are. Humiliation often arrives unexpectedly. You cannot always prepare for the exact words. You cannot always predict the person. You cannot always control the room. But you can train the habit of not handing over yourself immediately. The first breath is training. The first pause is training. The first calm sentence is training. The first time you do not laugh along with your own disrespect is training. The first time you do not send the furious message is training. The first time you walk away without performing the wound is training. And every repetition teaches the mind a new law. I can be attacked without being absorbed. That law changes a person. You stop fearing every public moment where someone may test you. You stop living with tense readiness to defend your worth. You stop needing to control every interpretation. You start trusting that even if someone tries to embarrass you, you will not abandon yourself in the process. This is not about looking calm. It is about becoming less available to humiliation as a form of control. There is a huge difference. Some people look calm because they are suppressing everything. They smile while resentment builds. They say nothing, but inside they are burning for revenge. That is not stoic calm. That is delayed poison.
Real calm is honest. It sees the disrespect, it names the tactic, it feels the sting. Then it chooses a response that does not corrupt the self. Sometimes that response is firm, sometimes it is quiet, sometimes it is leaving, sometimes it is a boundary spoken without apology. But it is never a surrender of your inner authority. This is why calm is not merely emotional control. It is moral control.
You are deciding what kind of person you will be when another person gives you an excuse to become worse. And that is where humiliation loses its deepest power, because humiliation tries to make you feel inferior. But when you remain calm, you quietly prove that your dignity was stronger than their attempt to disturb it. You do not need to humiliate them back. You do not need to win the room. You do not need to make the audience choose sides. You only need to avoid becoming a servant of the insult. And once you can do that, you begin to understand the next Stoic truth. You do not need to defend your dignity to possess it. 4. You do not need to defend your dignity to possess it. There is a trap inside humiliation that almost everyone falls into. Someone tries to make you look small, and immediately you feel the urge to prove that you are not. You want to correct the image. You want to repair the room. You want to make sure nobody believes the version of you that was just placed in front of them. So you begin defending yourself with too much urgency. You explain your intentions. You list your reasons. You bring up your history. You try to show your intelligence, your effort, your value, your pain, your innocence, your side of the story. And sometimes, without realizing it, you begin begging for the very dignity you already had. That is the danger. Because dignity is not something another person gives you. It is something you either remain loyal to or abandon under pressure. When someone humiliates you, the immature mind thinks, I need them to see my dignity. The Stoic mind thinks, I need to act from it. Those are completely different lives. If your dignity depends on whether a cruel person recognizes it, then your dignity is not yet yours. It is rented. It lives in their eyes. It rises when they approve and collapses when they mock. It waits outside your own soul for permission to exist. That is not dignity. That is emotional dependence, wearing the language of self-respect. Real dignity is quieter. It does not need to interrupt every insult. It does not need to correct every false impression. It does not need to chase every person who misunderstands you and force them to admit your worth. Dignity is the ability to remain upright when another person tries to bend your identity through shame. Ask yourself this when someone tries to humiliate you. What would dignity do here if it did not need applause? That question can save you from many unnecessary reactions. Because sometimes dignity speaks. Sometimes it says, do not speak to me that way. Sometimes it says, that was disrespectful and I will not continue this conversation under that tone. Sometimes it says, if you have something truthful to say it directly. Do not hide it inside mockery. But sometimes dignity says nothing. Sometimes dignity stands still. Sometimes dignity lets the person reveal themselves. Sometimes dignity refuses to explain the obvious to people committed to distortion. Sometimes dignity leaves the room because remaining would turn self-respect into negotiation. The point is not whether you speak or stay silent. The point is, who is leading? Is it dignity or panic? Is it reason or wounded pride? Is it self-respect or the need to control what everyone thinks? This matters because humiliation creates an internal emergency. You feel like you must act immediately or your image will be damaged forever. But most of the time, the emergency is not wisdom, it is fear trying to protect the ego. The ego says, fix this now. Dignity says, do not become frantic just because someone else became cruel. The ego says, make them respect you. Dignity says, remain respectable even if they refuse. The ego says, prove you are not beneath them. Dignity says, do not descend into begging. The ego says, everyone is watching. Dignity says, then let them watch you remain governed. There is a kind of power in not over-defending yourself, not because you do not care, because you care about the right thing. You care more about your conduct than about winning a public performance. You care more about your inner authority than about forcing a shallow person to see depth. You care more about leaving the moment clean than about leaving it loud. This is exactly the balance needed under humiliation. No frenzy. No apathy. No pretense. No frenzy means you do not panic to fix the image. No apathy means you do not pretend. Disrespect means nothing if it truly requires a boundary. No pretense means you do not act calm just to look superior while secretly feeding resentment. You choose the cleanest response because your character matters more than the scene. This is why defending dignity can become dangerous if it comes from the wrong place. A person who keeps saying, I deserve respect, may still be acting from the fear that they do not. A person who keeps explaining, I am not weak, may be giving the humiliator evidence that weakness was touched. A person who keeps shouting, you cannot treat me like this, may be correct in principle, but if they lose command of themselves, the message becomes mixed. A calm boundary carries more weight than a desperate defense. Imagine two responses. One person is humiliated and immediately launches into a long speech, voice shaking, words rushing, trying to convince everyone in the room that the insult was unfair. Another person pauses, looks directly at the speaker and says, that was beneath this conversation, and then stops. Which one feels more governed? Which one keeps more dignity? Which one refuses to give the humiliator a performance? Often it is the second, because precision protects dignity better than emotional excess. This does not mean short responses are always enough. There are moments where you need a longer conversation, especially if the humiliation happened in a relationship, a workplace, or a repeated pattern. But that conversation should happen from steadiness, not from the first wound. Never let the person who humiliated you decide the timing, tone, and temperature of your response. That is another form of control. Take the time needed to return to yourself. Then decide. Maybe you respond immediately with one sentence. Maybe you address it privately later. Maybe you document the behavior. Maybe you leave. Maybe you do not respond at all because the person has already shown they are not capable of honest dialogue. All of these can be dignified if they come from self-command. None of them are dignified if they come from panic. You cannot always control whether people respect you, but you can control whether you act in a way that respects yourself. You cannot control whether people misread your calm, but you can control whether your calm is honest. You cannot control whether the room understands your restraint, but you can control whether your restraint protects your character. That is freedom, a hard freedom, a lonely freedom sometimes, but freedom. because the moment you stop needing every person to recognize your dignity, you become much harder to reduce. Their mockery may still sting, their words may still disappoint you, their cruelty may still reveal something painful about the environment you are in, but you no longer have to chase them for a verdict. You no longer have to plead for moral recognition from someone acting without moral clarity. You no longer have to treat their disrespect as a court summons. You can simply ask, what response allows me to remain whole? Sometimes the answer will be speech, sometimes distance, sometimes silence, sometimes a boundary, sometimes a calm refusal to continue. But the answer should never be self-abandonment. This is the fourth Stoic truth. You do not need to defend your dignity to possess it. You possess it by living from it. And this leads to something deeper, because humiliation often hurts most when it touches a place in us that already feels exposed. A person's words can wound you, but the wound becomes more dangerous when it connects with shame you have never faced. 5. Shame becomes weaker when you stop hiding from it. Humiliation does not always hurt because the other person discovered something true about you. Sometimes it hurts because they touched something you were already afraid was true. That is the part most people do not want to examine. Someone laughs at your mistake, and the pain is not only the laughter. It is the old fear that maybe you are not as capable as you try to appear. Someone mocks the way you speak, the way you look, the way you work, the way you love, the way you failed, and the pain is not only their cruelty. It is the private shame you have been carrying quietly, hoping nobody would ever point at it. Someone brings up your past, and suddenly you are not in the present anymore. You are back inside an older version of yourself, a version you outgrew, a version you are still trying to forgive, a version someone has now dragged into the room as if it explains everything about who you are today. This is why humiliation can feel so violent. It does not only attack your image, it can awaken hidden shame. And hidden shame is easy to weaponize. What you refuse to face in yourself becomes easier for others to use against you. Not because they are powerful, but because secrecy gives the wound more authority. The thing you are terrified people will notice becomes a handle. The part of you that you keep buried becomes the exact place where a cruel person presses. The Stoic answer is not to pretend shame does not exist. The Stoic answer is to stop hiding from it. There is a hard kind of freedom that begins when you can look at yourself without flinching. Not with hatred, not with self-pity, not with the kind of dramatic confession that turns pain into performance. Just with honesty. Yes, I failed there. Yes, I was not ready. Yes, I still feel insecure about that. Yes, that part of my past happened. Yes, I have weaknesses. Yes, I am still learning how to stand without needing everyone's approval. There is something disarming about a person who has already faced themselves, not because they become invincible. They do not. Words can still hurt. Memory can still ache. Shame can still rise in the body before reason has time to speak. But the attack loses its surprise. And what loses surprise loses some control. If humiliation keeps finding the same wound, you cannot heal only by blaming the person who touched it. You may be right about their cruelty. You may be right that they were unfair. You may be right that their intention was ugly. But if the same comment destroys you every time, there is also inner work waiting for you. Not because you caused their behavior, because you are responsible for your freedom. This is where many people misunderstand Stoicism. They think self-responsibility means excusing others. It does not. A person can be cruel, and you can still ask what their cruelty revealed inside you. A person can be wrong, and you can still learn from the pain they triggered. A person can try to humiliate you, and you can still use that moment to understand the places where shame still rules you. That is not letting them win. That is taking the material back. Imagine someone says, "You always fail at everything." A reactive mind hears that and collapses into defense. "No, I do not. Look at everything I have done. Look at how hard I work. Look at all the times I succeeded. You do not know me." Maybe all of that is true. But the deeper question is, why did that sentence enter so deeply? Maybe because you are afraid your failures are more visible than your effort. Maybe because you still define yourself by one season when things fell apart. Maybe because you have been secretly demanding perfection from yourself, and their insult simply gave voice to the punishment you already inflict internally. That is painful to see, but it is also useful. Because if you can identify the shame, you can stop letting others be its owner. The humiliating comment may be external, but what did you decide it means? Did you decide they saw the real me? Did you decide now everyone now knows I am inadequate? Did you decide my past will always define me? Did you decide one mistake has erased all my growth? Did you decide if they laugh, I must be laughable? That judgment is where shame becomes a prison. And once you see the judgment, you can challenge it. Not with empty positivity, with truth. Maybe they saw a mistake, not your whole character. Maybe they saw one weak moment, not your entire life. Maybe they saw your discomfort, not your destiny. Maybe they saw something real, but not something final. Maybe they laughed because they lack depth, not because you lack worth. Shame becomes weaker when it is brought into the light of reason. It grows in vague darkness. It shrinks under precise examination. So do not only ask, "How do I respond to them?" Ask, "What did this expose in me?" And that question is not easy. It may make you uncomfortable. It may reveal that you still need to forgive yourself. It may show that you have been trying to appear stronger than you feel. It may uncover a part of you that wants approval so badly that mockery feels like death. Good. Now you can work with something real. The Stoic does not run from reality. The Stoic studies it. If you feel shame about failure, study failure. What actually happened? What did it teach you? What did you repair? What remains unfinished? Where are you still using one event as a permanent name for yourself? If you feel shame about rejection, study rejection. Did rejection prove your lack of worth, or did it reveal another person's inability, preference, fear, immaturity, or direction? Did you lose your value, or did you lose access to someone who did not choose you? If you feel shame about being underestimated, study that too. Are you truly weak? Or have you been waiting for people to recognize strength before you fully live from it? The point is not to become harsh with yourself. The point is to stop being vague. Vague shame is enormous. Specific shame becomes workable. "I am a failure" is crushing. "I failed at this in this season for these reasons, and I can learn from this" is painful but survivable. "I am pathetic" is a prison. "I reacted desperately because I was afraid of being abandoned" is honest, and honesty can be trained. "I am not enough" is a fog. "I am still seeking approval from people whose judgment I do not respect" is a doorway. This is why humiliation, as painful as it is, can reveal the exact territory where your freedom needs to be rebuilt. A person tries to use shame against you. You take the moment back and ask what still needs to be healed, disciplined, understood, accepted, or released. That is power. Quiet power, power they may never see. But you will feel it. Because the next time someone touches that same place, the reaction will be different. Maybe not perfectly calm, maybe not painless, but different. You will think, "I know this wound. I know why that hurt. I know what part of me they were trying to use, and I no longer need to collapse because it has been named. Naming the wound gives you distance from it. Distance gives you choice. Choice gives you dignity. This is how shame loses its grip. Not because the world stops being cruel, not because nobody ever tries to humiliate you again, but because you have stopped treating your hidden pain as something that must remain hidden at all costs. The person who has faced their shame becomes difficult to control through shame. They may still be insulted, they may still be misjudged, they may still be mocked, but they are less likely to panic because they are no longer protecting a fragile illusion of perfection. They know they are human, they know they have failed, they know they have weak places, they know they are unfinished, and they also know that none of this removes their capacity for virtue, discipline, courage, growth, or self-respect. That is the mature Stoic posture. Not nothing can hurt me, but what hurts me can teach me, and what teaches me does not have to own me. This is the fifth Stoic truth. Shame becomes weaker when you stop hiding from it. And once you stop hiding from shame, you become harder to bend. Because the next trap is even more dangerous. When someone tries to humiliate you, they are not only trying to make you feel small, they are often trying to make you become like them. 6. Do not become the person trying to break you. There is a moment in humiliation when the real danger begins. It is not the insult itself, it is what the insult invites you to become. Someone speaks to you with cruelty, and suddenly cruelty feels justified. Someone mocks you, and suddenly mockery feels like the only language they deserve. Someone tries to embarrass you, and the first instinct is to embarrass them back, harder, sharper, louder, in a way that makes the room turn against them instead of you. And for a second it feels like justice. It feels like strength. It feels like taking your power back. But if you are not careful, what you call power is only imitation. You have allowed the person trying to break you to become your teacher. This is one of the most difficult Stoic truths to accept. Not every reaction that feels strong is actually strong. Some reactions feel powerful because they give the ego relief, but they weaken the character at the same time. The ego wants revenge, the character wants command. The ego wants to win the moment. The character wants to remain clean after the moment is over. The ego says, they humiliated me, so now I have permission to humiliate them. The character says, their lack of virtue is not an invitation for me to abandon mine. That difference is everything, because humiliation often works by contagion. A person brings disorder into the room, then tries to make it spread into you. Their arrogance wants to awaken your arrogance. Their bitterness wants to awaken your bitterness. Their disrespect wants to awaken your disrespect. Their lack of control wants to recruit your lack of control. And if you become what they are, they have succeeded at a deeper level than most people realize. They did not just disturb you, they converted you. Even if only for a minute, even if everyone says you were right, even if your comeback was clever, even if the room laughs in your favor this time, you still have to ask the Stoic question. What did this do to my character? The best revenge is not to become like the person who injured you. That is not weakness, that is discipline, because becoming like the person who hurt you means they have shaped you. They have entered your conduct, they have lowered your standard, they have taken your response and made it resemble their own disorder. And if your enemy can make you betray your own principles, they have touched something far more important than your reputation. They have touched your direction. Think about the kind of person who uses humiliation as a weapon. They may be insecure, they may be competitive, they may be afraid of losing status, they may feel powerful only when someone else feels exposed. They may not know how to disagree without degrading, they may not know how to correct without dominating, they may not know how to feel significant without making another person feel inferior. Now ask yourself honestly, do you want that person to become your emotional model? Do you want their tone to choose your tone? Their immaturity to choose your behavior? Their cruelty to choose your language? Their lack of self-command to become the reason you lose yours? Before you answer humiliation, ask yourself, will this response make me more like the person I respect or more like the person trying to hurt me? That question can stop you from saying things you cannot take back. It can stop you from sending the message that burns the bridge and burns your peace with it. It can stop you from turning one person's ugly comment into a whole day of emotional pollution. It can stop you from letting 5 seconds of cruelty create 5 hours of regret inside you, because that is another hidden cost of reacting badly. The humiliator wounds you once, then your own reaction wounds you again. You replay what they said. Then you replay what you said. You wonder if you went too far. You wonder if people saw you differently. You wonder if your anger made their insult seem justified. You feel the first pain from them and the second pain from betraying your own standard. This is why Stoic calm is not just about protecting yourself from others. It is about protecting yourself from the version of you that appears when you stop guarding the gate. Anger often calls itself honesty. Revenge often calls itself justice. Cruelty often calls itself strength. But the Stoic mind asks, who is leading me right now? Reason or the wound? The fact that someone else started in vice does not require you to continue in vice. The fact that someone acted without discipline does not remove your responsibility to act with discipline. The fact that someone tried to make you small does not mean you must shrink your character to meet them. This is hard, especially when the humiliation is public, especially when people are watching, especially when your pride feels cornered, especially when the person knows exactly how to make it look like a joke. So if you react, you seem too sensitive, especially when they have done it before and your patience feels exhausted. But this is exactly why the moment matters. Anyone can speak about virtue when nobody is testing them. Anyone can claim self-control when the room is peaceful. Anyone can appear wise when no one is touching their wound. But humiliation reveals the distance between your philosophy and your reflexes. It shows whether your principles are decoration or training. A Stoic does not aim to be harmless. A Stoic aims to be governed. There is a difference. You can set boundaries, you can confront, you can leave, you can refuse disrespect, you can speak with force, you can make consequences clear, but you do not need to become vulgar, frantic, cruel, or chaotic to do it. A disciplined response is not a weak response. A clean response is not a soft response. A measured response is not a defeated response. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is simple. I will not continue this conversation if humiliation is the method. Or, you can speak to me directly, but not disrespectfully. Or, if your goal is to embarrass me, this discussion is over. These responses do not beg, they do not attack, they do not perform, they do not collapse. They name the tactic and protect the standard. That is strength with structure. The person trying to humiliate you may not like it. They may laugh again. They may call you sensitive. They may accuse you of being dramatic. That is common. People who use shame as a weapon often get offended when you refuse to bleed publicly. But do not let their second attack pull you into the trap you avoided the first time. Stay with the standard. Repeat it if needed. Leave if needed. Do not debate your right to be treated with basic respect with someone committed to disrespecting you. There are conversations that can be repaired. There are people who can receive correction. There are moments when a person crosses a line out of stress, ignorance, or poor judgment, and a calm confrontation can restore order. But there are also people who do not want restoration. They want a reaction. They want the theater. They want your emotional collapse because it gives them the feeling of control. Do not feed that hunger with your character. A person who tries to humiliate you is already showing you the kind of tool they are willing to use. Your task is not to pick up the same tool. Your task is to decide whether this situation deserves correction, distance, silence, documentation, or departure. That decision should come from wisdom, not infection. Because that is what humiliation tries to do. It tries to infect your behavior with the same disorder that produced the attack. And when you refuse, you break the chain. You become the place where the ugliness stops, not because you are weak, because you are strong enough not to pass it forward. This is a rare form of power. The world teaches people to return every blow with a bigger blow. It calls that confidence. It calls that dominance. It calls that not letting anyone disrespect you. But Stoicism asks for something higher than dominance. It asks for mastery. Dominance is about controlling the other person. Mastery is about not being controlled by them. Dominance wants them to feel small. Mastery refuses to become small. Dominance wants witnesses. Mastery can stand alone. Dominance asks, did I win the exchange? Mastery asks, did I keep my character? And that question will save your life in ways applause never will, because applause is unstable. Public approval is unstable. Winning a verbal fight is unstable, but character, trained under pressure, becomes something you can carry into every room. The person who tried to humiliate you may forget what they said. The room may move on, the moment may pass, but you will live with the person you became in response. Make sure that person is someone you can respect. This is the sixth Stoic truth. Do not become the person trying to break you. Let them reveal their disorder. Let them expose their hunger for superiority. Let them show the poverty of their own self-command. But do not let them use your reaction as a place to hide. Stand firm, stay clean, speak when needed, leave when necessary, but do not become a copy of the person who forgot their own dignity while trying to steal yours. And once you understand this, you are ready for the next truth, because staying calm does not always mean staying silent. Sometimes the strongest response is not loud, it is precise. 7. The strongest response is often precise, not loud. When someone tries to humiliate you, volume becomes tempting. You feel the pressure to match their force, to make your voice harder, to make your words sharper, to answer in a way that proves you are not afraid, not weak, not someone they can step on without consequence. And sometimes you do need to respond. There are moments when silence would only give disrespect more room to grow. There are moments when walking away too quickly would leave a pattern untouched. There are moments when a person needs to hear a boundary clearly, directly, and without apology. But here is the Stoic truth most people miss. The strength of your response is not measured by how loud it is. It is measured by how much of yourself you still possess while giving it. A loud response can come from panic. A sharp comeback can come from insecurity. A powerful speech can come from a wounded ego begging to be seen as strong, but a precise response comes from command. It does not spill everywhere. It does not reveal every wound. It does not hand the other person a map of where to strike next. It says what needs to be said, no more, no less. It protects the boundary without turning the moment into a performance. This is important because humiliation tries to pull you into excess. It wants too many words, too much emotion, too much explanation, too much defense, too much exposure. The person humiliating you often hopes you will overreact because your excess gives them cover. If you shout, they can talk about your tone. If you insult them back, they can talk about your cruelty. If you explain for 10 minutes, they can enjoy the power of making you plead for recognition. Precision denies them that material. Precision says, I am not here to entertain your disorder. Precision says, I can name what happened without becoming chaotic. Precision says, I do not need to bleed in public for my boundary to be real. This is why a calm sentence can be sharper than an angry speech. Not because it is more polite, because it is harder to manipulate. Think about the difference between these two responses. The first person hears a humiliating comment and immediately says, "Why would you say that? You always do this. You are so disrespectful. Everyone knows you act like this. I'm tired of being treated like this. You have no idea what I have been through." Maybe the pain is valid. Maybe every word has a history behind it. But in the moment, the message becomes tangled with emotion. The humiliator can escape into the chaos. They can say, "Wait, calm down." They can say, "You are overreacting." They can say, "It was just a joke." They can make the scene about your intensity instead of their disrespect. Now imagine the second person pauses and says, "Do not speak to me that way." Then stops or says, "If you have a real point, make it respectfully." Then stops or says, "That comment was meant to embarrass me, not to solve anything." Then stops. There is no begging in that, no chasing, no emotional flood, no performance. The response is clean enough that the other person cannot easily hide behind it. That is Stoic precision. If you practice speaking from panic, panic becomes your language. If you practice over-explaining, over-explaining becomes your reflex. If you practice attacking back, attack becomes your identity in conflict. But if you practice precise boundaries, your nervous system begins to learn that you do not need emotional excess to protect yourself. You can be firm without being frantic. You can be clear without being cruel. You can be direct without being desperate. This is a discipline. And like every discipline, it must be trained before the crisis. People think they will magically become calm when humiliated. They will not. Under pressure, you usually fall to the level of your practiced habits. If your habit is immediate defense, you will defend. If your habit is silence from fear, you will freeze. If your habit is revenge, you will strike. If your habit is begging to be understood, you will explain yourself into exhaustion. So prepare your words before the moment arrives, not scripts that make you robotic, standards that make you steady. For example, "I am open to criticism, but not humiliation." That was disrespectful. Say it differently. "I will discuss the issue, not accept the insult." You can disagree with me without trying to embarrass me. "I am not continuing this conversation in that tone." These sentences are short because dignity does not need decoration. They are not designed to win applause. They are designed to protect self-command. That matters because, in humiliation, the temptation is to win the room. You want people to see that you are right. You want witnesses. You want the atmosphere to shift in your favor. You want the person who humiliated you to feel exposed. But if your response depends on the room applauding, you have already given the room too much power. The Stoic does not speak to perform for witnesses. The Stoic speaks to remain aligned with reason and virtue. This does not mean you ignore social reality. Of course, public humiliation carries social weight. Of course, your reputation matters in practical ways. Of course, there are workplaces, families, relationships, and communities where disrespect must be addressed clearly. But reputation is not protected by uncontrolled emotion. It is protected by consistent conduct. The person who can speak calmly under pressure builds a different kind of authority. Not the authority of intimidation, the authority of self-command. People may not always like it, they may not immediately admit it, but they feel the difference between a person who is reacting and a person who is choosing. And even if they do not feel it, you will. You will leave the moment with less regret. You will remember that you did not become what they invited you to become. You will know that you did not allow someone else's ugliness to dictate your language. This is why precision is not just communication. It is protection. It protects your mind from being dragged into disorder. It protects your dignity from becoming a public negotiation. It protects the truth from being buried under emotional excess. It protects your future self from having to recover from words spoken in wounded pride. Under humiliation, time is not always long. Sometimes it is only one breath, 1 second, one decision not to let the first impulse become the first sentence. But that small delay can change everything, because the first sentence often decides the direction of the entire exchange. If your first sentence is chaotic, the moment becomes chaotic. If your first sentence is defensive, the moment becomes about your defense. If your first sentence is cruel, the moment becomes a contest of cruelty. But if your first sentence is precise, you create a boundary around the conversation. You tell the other person and yourself what kind of exchange you will not enter. That is power. Not theatrical power, not social media power, real power. The kind you can use when your boss makes a humiliating remark in front of the team. The kind you can use when a partner disguises contempt as humor. The kind you can use when a family member brings up your past to reduce your present. The kind you can use when someone tries to provoke you into becoming the unstable one. In those moments, do not search for the perfect comeback. Search for the cleanest truth. A comeback is often designed to wound. A boundary is designed to protect. A comeback wants victory. A boundary wants order. A comeback says, I can hurt you too. A boundary says, you will not use this method with me. And there will be people who test it. They will laugh at your boundary. They will say you are too sensitive. They will say you cannot take a joke. They will say you are making a big deal out of nothing. This is another part of the humiliation pattern. First, they try to wound you. Then they try to shame you for naming the wound. Do not be confused by that. A person who insults you and then mocks your boundary is not proving that you are weak. They are proving that your boundary interrupted something they expected to control. Stay precise. Do not turn one clean sentence into a debate about your right to have it. You can say, I said what I meant, or this is not about sensitivity, it is about respect, or if respect is too much to ask, this conversation is not useful. Then stop. The stopping is part of the strength. Many people destroy a strong boundary by continuing to talk after it. They keep explaining until the boundary becomes a request. They keep justifying until self-respect starts sounding like insecurity. They keep filling the silence because silence feels uncomfortable. Let the silence work. A precise response needs space after it. That space forces the other person to meet what was said. It also trains you not to rescue people from the discomfort of your self-respect. This is especially important if you have spent years over-explaining yourself. Maybe you grew up around people who twisted your words. Maybe you learned that peace required long explanations. Maybe you were punished for having boundaries. Maybe you became skilled at defending your feelings before anyone even asked. If that is you, precision may feel unnatural at first. It may feel rude. It may feel incomplete. It may feel dangerous. But sometimes what feels rude is only the absence of self-abandonment. Sometimes what feels incomplete is actually self-respect, refusing to overperform. Sometimes what feels dangerous is your nervous system adjusting to the fact that you are no longer asking permission to have a boundary. The Stoic does not aim to speak more. The Stoic aims to speak with alignment. Words should serve reason, not panic. They should serve dignity, not image. They should serve truth, not revenge. This is the seventh Stoic truth. The strongest response is often precise, not loud. You do not need to shout to be firm. You do not need to insult to be powerful. You do not need to explain every wound to make a boundary valid. You need enough calm to see clearly, enough courage to speak cleanly, and enough self-respect to stop when the point has been made. And once you learn this, another truth becomes possible. because sometimes even the most precise response is not the strongest move. Sometimes the strongest move is to leave the arena entirely. 8. Walking away can be a form of victory. There are moments when staying in the room is not courage. It is addiction to being understood. It is the old hunger to make disrespectful people finally see your worth. It is the fear that if you walk away, they will think they won. It is the desperate need to correct the story before anyone leaves with the wrong version of you in their mind. And this is one of the hardest truths to accept. Sometimes walking away is not losing the moment. Sometimes walking away is refusing to let the moment consume more of your life. Humiliation often creates a false arena. Someone says something cruel, and suddenly it feels as if you have been pushed into a contest. You feel pressure to respond, to defend, to win, to make the room understand, to make the person regret what they said, to make sure you do not look weak. But not every arena deserves your energy. Not every person deserves access to your explanation. Not every insult deserves a trial. Not every room deserves the version of you that still has peace. This is where Stoicism becomes uncomfortable, because the ego hates walking away. The ego wants a clean victory. It wants the final word. It wants the humiliator to look defeated. It wants witnesses to recognize your strength. It wants the world to confirm that you were right. But wisdom asks a different question. What will this cost me if I stay? Not financially, not socially, internally. What will this cost my calm? What will this cost my character? What will this cost my clarity for the rest of the day? What will this cost my ability to sleep tonight? What will this cost the person I am trying to become? Some conversations are worth having. Some conflicts are worth confronting. Some disrespect must be addressed clearly, because silence would allow a pattern to grow. But there are also moments when the other person is not seeking truth. They are seeking control. They do not want understanding. They want a reaction. They do not want resolution. They want a stage. They do not want dialogue. They want to drag you into emotional mud and then call you dirty. In those moments, leaving is not avoidance. Leaving is intelligence. You do not become stronger by entering every trap to prove you are not afraid. You become stronger by knowing which doors are not worth opening. Walking away becomes victory when staying would require self-betrayal. If you have to become chaotic to remain in the room, leave. If you have to beg for basic respect, leave. If you have to explain your humanity to someone committed to degrading it, leave. If you have to keep absorbing humiliation so nobody calls you sensitive, leave. If the conversation keeps demanding your dignity as the price of participation, leave. This does not mean storming out dramatically. That is often just another form of reaction. It does not mean slamming doors, throwing words over your shoulder, or leaving in a way that begs people to chase you. A Stoic departure is clean. You decide the arena no longer serves reason or virtue, and you remove yourself without turning the exit into another performance. You can say, "This conversation is no longer useful," or "I am not continuing under this tone," or "We can speak later if this becomes respectful," or "I'm going to step away now," and then you go, no speech, no pleading, no final insult, no desperate attempt to make them understand why you are leaving. Because the more you explain your exit to someone committed to humiliating you, the more you turn your dignity into a negotiation. That is the trap. People who use humiliation often want you to stay and keep proving that you deserve to leave. They want you to defend your boundary. They want you to justify your discomfort. They want you to turn your self-respect into an argument they can mock. Do not do that. Your boundary does not need to win a debate before it becomes valid. If the room is burning your peace, you are allowed to step outside. There is a difference between escaping and returning. Escaping says, "I cannot handle this." Returning says, I will not abandon myself here. Escaping is ruled by fear. Returning is guided by self-command. Escaping collapses. Returning chooses. When you walk away with that mindset, your exit becomes a statement. Even if you never raise your voice, it says, my presence has value. Access to me is not guaranteed. I will not remain where humiliation is the method of communication. You may continue this performance, but I will not be part of the cast. That kind of departure can feel strange if you have spent years trying to convince people to treat you well. Maybe you learn to stay in painful conversations because leaving felt rude. Maybe you learn to tolerate disrespect because you were afraid of being called difficult. Maybe you learned that love meant enduring humiliation quietly. Maybe you learned that professionalism meant swallowing public embarrassment and smiling. Maybe you learned that strength meant never showing that something crossed a line. But Stoicism does not ask you to become available for abuse. It asks you to become governed by reason. And reason sometimes says, this is not a place for my energy. Reason sometimes says, this person is not ready for honest dialogue. Reason sometimes says, the cost of staying is greater than the value of being understood. Reason sometimes says, leave before your character starts negotiating with your pain. That last one matters, because the longer you remain in a humiliating situation, the more your nervous system starts searching for survival. And survival does not always sound like wisdom. Sometimes it sounds like over-explaining. Sometimes it sounds like sarcasm. Sometimes it sounds like begging. Sometimes it sounds like rage. Sometimes it sounds like laughing along with disrespect just to make the tension stop. Walking away protects you from reaching the point where survival starts speaking for you. It gives you distance. And distance gives reason room to return. This is especially important in relationships where humiliation repeats itself. A single cruel comment may be a moment of poor judgment. A pattern of humiliation is a system. If someone regularly embarrasses you, mocks you, exposes private wounds, dismisses your feelings, or turns your boundaries into jokes, then the issue is not one sentence. The issue is the environment. And in a repeated environment, staying calm is not enough. You must decide what continued access to you means. A stoic person does not measure strength by how much disrespect they can endure. That is not strength. That is conditioning. Strength is knowing when endurance has turned into self-erasure. There are people who will praise your patience because your patience benefits them. They will call you mature when you tolerate what they should never have done. They will call you calm when you are really exhausted. They will call you forgiving when you are actually afraid to set a consequence. Be careful. Not everyone who praises your restraint respects your dignity. Some people praise your restraint because it makes you easier to mistreat. Stoic endurance must be connected to wisdom. Otherwise, it becomes a beautiful name for staying where your soul is being slowly trained to accept less than basic respect. So when someone tries to humiliate you, ask yourself, is this a moment to correct? Is this a moment to set a boundary? Is this a moment to ignore? Is this a moment to document? Is this a moment to leave? Each answer can be strong if it comes from clarity. But do not assume staying is always stronger than leaving. Sometimes staying is pride. Sometimes leaving is discipline. Sometimes staying is fear of judgment. Sometimes leaving is loyalty to your own peace. Sometimes staying is the need to win. Sometimes leaving is the understanding that no victory in that room is worth becoming less of yourself. This is difficult because walking away can leave things unresolved. People may misunderstand your silence. They may say you were weak. They may say you could not handle the truth. They may twist the story after you leave. Let them. This does not mean you ignore real consequences. In a workplace, you may need to document. In a family, you may need to communicate later. In a relationship, you may need to define a clear boundary. In a public setting, you may need to protect your reputation wisely. But emotionally, you must become less addicted to correcting every distorted version of you. Some people will misread your exit because misreading you helps them avoid seeing themselves. You cannot spend your life returning to every room where your name is being mishandled. You have a life to govern. You have a mind to protect. You have work to do. You have a character to build. And that character cannot be built if every insulting person gets to redirect your entire day. This is why walking away can be a form of victory. Because you are not only leaving the person, you are leaving the version of yourself that would have stayed too long, argued too desperately, explained too much, and accepted too little. You are leaving the old agreement that said, I must be understood by everyone before I can be at peace. You are leaving the belief that every attack deserves your presence. You are leaving the habit of proving your worth to people who benefit from pretending not to see it. That is not weakness. That is freedom with a spine. The person trying to humiliate you may still speak, they may still laugh, they may still perform for the room, but they have lost access to your participation. And without your participation, humiliation loses one of its main sources of fuel. This is the 8th Stoic truth. Walking away can be a form of victory, not because you are afraid of conflict, because you understand that your peace, your dignity, and your self-command are not objects to be spent in every cheap arena. And once you understand when to leave, you can understand the final truth. Even the pain of humiliation can be transformed. What was meant to make you collapse can become training for a stronger mind. 9. Humiliation becomes training when you refuse to collapse. Humiliation is painful because it feels like reduction. Someone tries to take a complex human being and shrink them into one moment, one mistake, one flaw, one weakness, one awkward sentence, one past failure, one visible insecurity, one thing that can be pointed at, laughed at, and used as proof that you are less than you are. That is why the first instinct is to fight the reduction. You want to say, I am more than this. You want to show them the full story. You want to recover the parts of yourself the humiliation ignored. But the Stoic path asks something deeper. Instead of only asking, how do I stop this from hurting? Ask, how can this pain train me? That question changes the entire meaning of the attack. Because if humiliation can only wound you, then every cruel person becomes a threat to your peace. Every mocking comment becomes an emergency. Every public embarrassment becomes a danger to your identity. You begin living defensively, always trying to avoid being seen in the wrong light, always preparing for disrespect, always carrying the fear that someone might expose a weak place. But if humiliation can train you, then even the attempt to reduce you becomes material for your growth. This does not make the person right. It does not make cruelty acceptable. It does not mean you should seek humiliation or remain around people who enjoy degrading you. It means that once the moment has happened, you refuse to let pain be wasted. That is a deeply Stoic decision. Humiliation is an obstacle, a sharp one, a personal one, a painful one, but it can still become the way. It can train your pause, it can train your breathing, it can train your ability to separate someone's opinion from your identity, it can train your discipline not to return cruelty with cruelty, it can train your courage to set a boundary, it can train your wisdom to leave an arena that does not deserve your presence, it can train your capacity to feel pain without turning pain into collapse. That last part matters most, because emotional strength is not the absence of impact, it is the refusal to become only the impact. A strong person can be hurt and still choose. A strong person can feel shame rise and still examine it. A strong person can be mocked and still stay aligned with their values. A strong person can leave the room wounded and still not let the wound become their name. This is not natural at first. Your first humiliating moments may not feel like training. They may feel like failure. Maybe you reacted badly. Maybe you froze. Maybe you over-explained. Maybe you smiled along with a joke that hurt you because you did not know how to respond. Maybe you exploded and later regretted giving the other person exactly what they wanted. Do not use that as another reason to hate yourself. Use it as data. The Stoic does not waste even the moments where they fell short. The Stoic asks, what did this reveal? That question is powerful because it turns humiliation into a teacher without turning the humiliator into an authority. They are not your master. The moment is your material. After someone tries to humiliate you, do not only replay what they said. Most people do this for hours. They replay the sentence, the tone, the facial expression, the laughter, the silence in the room. They torture themselves with imaginary comebacks and alternate endings. They keep returning to the scene as if thinking about it long enough will give them back control. But rumination is not reflection. Rumination repeats pain. Reflection extracts wisdom. The Stoic review is different. Ask yourself, what did I feel first? Was it anger, shame, fear, embarrassment? A need to prove myself? A desire to disappear? Then ask, what did I almost do? Did I almost attack? Did I almost beg? Did I almost lie? Did I almost laugh along? Did I almost expose more of myself than the moment deserved? Then ask, what did I actually choose? This is where honesty matters. Do not exaggerate your strength. Do not exaggerate your failure. See clearly. Maybe you handled it better than before. Maybe you paused for 1 second longer. Maybe you spoke with a little more calm. Maybe you still lost control, but you recognized it faster. That is progress. Small progress counts because character is trained through repetition, not fantasy. Then ask, what did this reveal about the other person? Were they seeking truth or dominance? Were they correcting or performing? Were they careless or intentionally cruel? Were they capable of receiving a boundary or only interested in making you bleed? Then ask, what did this reveal about me? This is the hardest question. Maybe it revealed that you still depend too much on public approval. Maybe it revealed that you confuse criticism with rejection. Maybe it revealed that you have not forgiven your past. Maybe it revealed that you need stronger boundaries at work. Maybe it revealed that you keep giving access to people who have repeatedly shown you contempt. Maybe it revealed that your calm is still more theoretical than trained. Good. Now you know where to work. Humiliation becomes less terrifying when it becomes specific training. If you were humiliated by public criticism, train the ability to separate correction from contempt. If you were humiliated by mockery, train the ability not to laugh along with your own disrespect. If you were humiliated by someone exposing your past, train the ability to own your history without letting it define your future. If you were humiliated by comparison, train the ability to measure yourself by virtue, not by another person's timeline. If you were humiliated by rejection, train the ability to be unwanted by one person without becoming unknown to yourself. If you were humiliated by being ignored, train the ability to remain valuable without being immediately recognized. This is